Hello everyone, welcome to Macklin Reads. My name is Macklin and I will be your reader. Today I shall be reading the Wikipedia page titled Breaking Bad, which is about the American crime drama TV series. We shall also be adding a few extra comments during this reading, and I hope you enjoy them. As always, please listen to the sound of the rain and enjoy learning about the Breaking Bad series subconsciously as you fall asleep to the wonderful sound of the rain. Now, Breaking Bad is an American neo-western crime drama television series created by Vince Gilligan for AMC. Set and filmed in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the series follows Walter White, played by Bryan Cranston, as an overqualified high school chemistry teacher who, after being diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer, begins producing and selling methamphetamine with former student Jesse Pinkman, played by Aaron Paul, to secure his family's financial future. This series also stars Anna Gunn, Dean Norris, Betsy Brandt, R.J. Might, Giancarlo Esposito, Bob Odenkirk, and Jonathan Banks. Breaking Bad premiered on AMC on January 20th, 2008, and concluded on September 29, 2013, after 5 seasons and 62 episodes. Its first season received generally positive reviews, while later seasons, especially the 5th and final season, received widespread critical acclaim for the performances, writing, direction, cinematography, and character development. The series had modest viewership during its first 3 seasons, before the viewership increased after it became available on Netflix prior to the 4th season. Viewership rose further during the second half of the final season in 2013, and the series finale became one of the most watched cable television episodes of its era. Netflix was a huge contributing factor at this time. Since its conclusion, Breaking Bad has been widely regarded by critics as one of the greatest television series of all time. It received numerous accolades, including 16 Primetime Emmy Awards, 2 Golden Globe Awards, 2 Peabody Awards, and a British Academy Television Award. Cranston won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series 4 times. Paul won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Drama Series 3 times, and Gunn won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Drama Series twice. The series has continued to appear in retrospective rankings of the best television programs. I'm sure plenty of those are on YouTube. The series gave rise to the larger Breaking Bad franchise, Better Call Saul, as a spin-off series centered on Odenkirk's character, Saul Goodman, debuted on AMC on February 8, 2015, and concluded on August 15, 2022. El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, is a sequel film starring Paul, as released on Netflix and in selected theaters on October 11, 2019. Now for the premise of the show. Breaking Bad follows Walter White, a financially struggling high school chemistry teacher in Albuquerque, New Mexico, who enters the local methamphetamine trade after being diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer. Completely understandable. Seeking to secure his family's financial future, Walter begins producing methamphetamine with his former student Jesse Pinkman in a rolling meth lab. Their operation gradually expands as they produce a highly pure form of blue methamphetamine that becomes widely sought after. Walter adopts the alias Heisenberg to conceal his identity. His involvement in the drug trade brings him into conflict with his family, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, through his brother-in-law Hank Strader, local gangs, regional distributors, and Mexican drug cartels, placing him and his family at risk. The events of the series take place between 2008 and 2010. Now, the cast and characters. The main characters, Bryan Cranston as Walter White, is the high school's chemistry teacher who, shortly after his 50th birthday, is diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer. A little old to get into the methamphetamine business, but who am I to judge? As his drug operation expands, Walter gains a notorious reputation under the alias Heisenberg. Cranston said he was interested in moving from comedy towards drama, while recognizing that dramatic roles could still include moments of comedy. Anna Gunn as Skylar White, Walter's wife, who is pregnant with their second child before his diagnosis and becomes increasingly suspicious of his behavior. Gunn described Skylar as grounded, tough, smart, and driven, and said the character's stalled writing career reflected her desire to be creative and productive. Part of the reason I started this channel. Aaron Paul as Jesse Pinkman, Walter's former student and partner in the methamphetamine trade. Paul described Jesse as a lost young man rather than a bad person, and compared Jesse and Walter's friendship to The Odd Couple. Dean Norris as Hank Schrader, Walter and Skylar's brother-in-law and DEA agent, investigating the local methamphetamine trade. At the beginning of the series, Hank was intended to serve as a comic relief. Betsy Brandt as Marie Schrader, Skylar's sister and Hank's wife, who is characterized by her loyalty to her family and her recurring kleptomania. Brandt said that although Marie could be unpleasant, the character had greater depth through her concern for her family. R.J. Might as Walter White Jr., Walter and Skylar's son, who has cerebral palsy. Might also has cerebral palsy, although a milder form, and said he adjusted his speech and movement to portray the character. Giancarlo Esposito as Gustavo Gus Fring was in seasons 3 through 4, and was a guest appearance in season 2. He was a drug distributor who publicly owns the fast food chain Los Pollos Hermanos. Esposito said he incorporated his yoga training into his performance to give Gus a controlled and composed physical presence. Bob Odenkirk as Saul Goodman was seen in seasons 3 through 5 and recurring during season 2. A criminal lawyer who represents Walter and Jesse. Odenkirk drew inspiration for Saul Goodman's vocal delivery from film producer Robert Evans. Jonathan Banks as Mike Ehrmantraut was appeared in seasons 3 through 5 and a guest on season 2. A fixer, a private investigator, and a hitman who worked for Gus and Saul. Banks said he avoided closely modeling Mike on Harvey Keitel's Winston Wolfe character from Pulp Fiction, despite the comparisons between the two cleaner roles. Laura Frazier as Lydia Odarte Whaley during season 5, a Madrigal electromotive executive and former associate of Gus Fring, who supplies Walter and Jesse with methylamine and helps Walter expand his operation overseas. Jesse Plemons as Todd Alquist, season 5, a Vominos pest control employee who becomes an associate of Walter and Jesse. There are quite a few recurring characters. We're going to list them now. Stephen Michael Quesada as Stephen Gomi Gomez. Matt Jones as Brandon Badger Mayhew. Charles Baker as Skinny Pete. Rodney Rush as Christian Combo Ortega. Jessica Hecht and Adam Godley as Gretchen and Elliot Schwartz. Raymond Cruz as Tuco Salamanca. Marco Margolis as Hector Salamanca. Christopher Cousins as Ted Benecke. Kristen Ritter as Jane Margolis. David Costabile as Gail Boeticker. Daniel Moncada and Luis Moncada as Lionel and Marco Salamanca. Javier Grajeda as Juan Bolsa. Emily Rios as Andrea Cantillo. Lavelle Crawford as Julio Babinho. Bill Burr as Patrick Cubby. Michael Bowen as Jack Welker. Now, the production and conception. Breaking Bad was created by Vince Gilligan, who had spent several years writing the Fox TV series The X-Files. Gilligan wanted to create a series in which the protagonist became the antagonist. Television is historically good at keeping its characters in a self-imposed stasis, so that the shows can go on for years or even decades, he said. When I realized this, the logical next step was to think, how can I do a show in which the fundamental drive is toward change? He added that his goal with Walter White was to turn him from Mr. Chips into Scarface. Gilligan believed the concept of showing the full drastic transformation of a character across the run of a television show was a risky concept, and would have been difficult to pitch without other powerful factors to support it, such as strong cinematography and acting. The show's title is a Southern colloquialism meaning, among other things, raising hell, and was chosen by Gilligan to describe Walter's transformation. According to Time Entertainment editor Lily Rothman, the term has a broader meaning, and is an old phrase which connotes more violence than raising hell does. The words possess a wide variety of nuances. To break bad can mean to go wild, to defy authority, and break the law, to be verbally combative, belligerent, or threatening, or followed by the preposition on, to dominate or humiliate. The concept emerged as Gilligan talked with his fellow X-Files writer Thomas Schnauz regarding their current unemployment, and joked that the solution was for them to put a meth lab in the back of an RV and drive around the country cooking meth and making money. After writing the concept for the show and pilot, Gilligan pitched it to Sony Pictures Television, who became very interested in supporting it. Sony arranged for meetings with the various cable networks. Showtime passed on this, as they had already started broadcasting Weeds, a show with similarity to the premise of Breaking Bad. While his producers convinced him that the show was different enough to still be successful, Gilligan later stated that he would not have gone forward with the idea had he known about Weeds earlier. Other networks, like HBO and TNT, also passed on the idea, but eventually FX took interest and began initial discussions on producing the pilot. At the same time, FX had also started development of Dirt, a female-centric crime-based drama series, and with 3 existing male-centric shows already on the network, FX passed up Breaking Bad for Dirt. One of Gilligan's agents spoke to Jeremy Ellis, the director of original programming for AMC, who was looking for more original shows to add alongside their upcoming Mad Men. Elise was intrigued, and soon a meeting was set up between Gilligan, Elise, and 2 programming executives. Gilligan was not optimistic about this meeting, fearing they would just put him off, but instead all 3 showed great interest, and the meeting ended up establishing how AMC would acquire the rights from FX and set the pilot into production. It took about a year following this meeting before Sony had set up the rights with AMC and production could start. The developmental history. The network ordered 9 episodes for the first season, including the pilot. But the 2007 to 2008 Writers Guild of America strike limited the production to 7 episodes, as well as delayed the start of production for the second season. Within the original 9-episode arc, Gilligan had planned to kill off Jesse or Hank as a, quote, ballsy moment to end the season on. This death was eliminated with the limited episode count, which Gilligan found to be a net positive, given the strength of acting that both Paul and Norris brought to these roles through the seasons. The strike also helped to slow down production long enough for Gilligan and his writing team to readjust the pacing of the show, which in the original arc had been moving too quickly. Gould stated that the writer's strike saved the show, as had they produced the 2 additional episodes in the first season, they would have gone down a different creative path that he believes would have led to the show's cancellation by its 3rd season. The initial versions of the script were set in Riverside, California, but at the suggestion of Sony, Albuquerque was chosen for the production's location due to the favorable financial conditions offered by the state of New Mexico. Once Gilligan recognized that this would mean what we'd always have to be avoiding the Sandia Mountains, quote, in shots directed towards the east, the story setting was changed to the actual production location. Filming would primarily take place in Albuquerque studios, and it was shot primarily on 35mm film, with digital cameras employed as needed for additional angles, point-of-view shots, and time-lapse photography. Early episodes cost about $3 million each to produce, higher than the average cost for a basic cable program. That's plenty of money. Around 2010, AMC had expressed to Sony Pictures Television and Gilligan that they felt that the third season would be the last for Breaking Bad. Sony started to shop the show around, having gained quick interest from the FX network for 2 more seasons, upon which AMC changed its mind and allowed the show to continue. At the same time, Netflix was starting to shop for content to add to its service, and arranged a deal with Sony for Breaking Bad to be available after the airing of the 4th season. Knowing that AMC had placed Breaking Bad on a potential cancellation route, Sony pushed to have the show added to the service in time for the 4th season. Breaking Bad's viewership grew greatly as viewers binged the series on Netflix, helping to assure that a 5th season could be made. The 5th season premiere had more than double the viewership compared to the 4th season premiere, attributed to the Netflix availability. Gilligan thanked Netflix at the Emmy Awards in September 2013 after the series' conclusion for the popularity of the series, saying that Netflix kept us on the air. As the series progressed, Gilligan and the writing staff of Breaking Bad made Walter increasingly unsympathetic. Gilligan said during the run of the series, "He's going from being a protagonist to an antagonist. We want to make people question who they're pulling for and why." Cranston said by the 4th season, "I think Walt figured out it's better to be a pursuer than the pursued. He's well on his way to badass." In July 2011, Vince Gilligan indicated that he intended to conclude Breaking Bad at the end of its 5th season. In early August 2011, negotiations began over a deal regarding the 5th and possible final season between the network AMC and Sony Pictures Television, the production company of the series. AMC proposed a shortened 5th season, 6 to 8 episodes instead of 13, to cut costs, but the producers declined. Sony then approached other cable networks about possibly picking up the show if a deal could not be made. On August 14, 2011, AMC renewed the series for a 5th and final season consisting of 16 episodes. Whew. In April 2012, Bryan Cranston revealed that the 5th season would be split into 2 halves, with the first 8 episodes airing in 2012 and the final 8 in 2013. Before the series finale, Gilligan said that it was difficult to write for Walter White because the character was so dark and morally questionable. "I'm going to miss the show when it's over, but on some level, it'll be a relief to not have Walt in my head anymore." Gilligan later said that the idea for Walter's character intrigued him so much that he didn't really give much thought on how well it would sell, stating that he would have given up on the premise since it was such an odd, dark story that could have difficulties been pitched to the studios. Ultimately, Gilligan chose to end Breaking Bad with Walter's death, occurring in story 2 years after he had first been diagnosed with cancer and given 2 years to live. Gilligan said by the end of the series, "It feels as if we should adhere to our promise that we explicitly made to our audience from the first episode." The writing process. Gilligan served as showrunner and led a collaborative writer's room. Brett Martin observed the writer's room during production of the 4th season and described Gilligan as balancing close creative control with an open collaborative style. Sounds like antonyms to me. The room included Thomas Schnauz, Jennifer Hutchison, Wally Beckett, Sam Catlin, Peter Gould, and George Mastras, with story points arranged on index cards across the season board. The writers also used maps of New Mexico and Albuquerque and a schematic of Walter's fictional superlab while developing story material. Gold said that the writer's room usually consisted of 6 writers and Gilligan, who worked together on weekdays to break stories. He described the process as additive rather than competitive, with writers building on one another's ideas until a scene or plot turn developed into a usable story point. Gold also said the series writers remained involved after scripts were completed, including during preparation, casting sessions, prop meetings, tone meetings with directors and producers, filming, editing, and sound work. The writers did not always plan every plot resolution in advance. Gilligan said the final season's flash forward to Walter buying a machine gun began with an image that interested the writers, before they had determined its exact payoff. He said the writers had broad ideas about how the moment might resolve, but spent weeks or months working out the details. In a later interview, Gilligan said that the writers intentionally avoided a fixed roadmap for much of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, instead allowing character behavior to guide later story turns. Now for the casting. Breaking Bad, Vince Gilligan cast Bryan Cranston for the role of Walter White based on having worked with him in the Drive episode of the science fiction television series The X-Files, on which Gilligan worked as a writer. Cranston played an anti-Semite with a terminal illness who took series co-protagonist Max Mulder, David Duchovny, hostage. Gilligan said Walter had to remain both loathsome and sympathetic, and believed Cranston could maintain that balance. AMC officials, who were initially reluctant with the casting choice, having known Cranston only as the over-the-top character Hal on the comedy series Malcolm in the Middle, approached actors John Cusack and Matthew Broderick about the role. When both actors declined, the executives were persuaded to cast Cranston after seeing his X-Files episode. Cranston contributed significantly to the formation and development of Walter White persona. When Gilligan left much of Walter's past unexplained during the development of the series, the actor wrote his own backstory for the character. At the start of the show, Cranston gained 10 pounds to reflect the character's personal decline, and had the natural red highlights in his hair dyed brown. He collaborated with costume designer Kathleen DeToro on a wardrobe of mostly neutral green and brown colors to make the character bland and unremarkable, and worked with makeup artist Frida Valenzuela to create a mustache he described as impotent and like a dead caterpillar. Cranston repeatedly identified elements in certain scripts where he disagreed with how the character was handled, and went so far as to call Gilligan directly when he could not work out disagreements with the episode's screenwriters. Cranston has said he was inspired partially by his elderly father for how Walter carries himself physically, which he described as a little hunched over, never erect, as if the weight of the world is on this man's shoulders. In contrast to his character, Cranston has been described as extremely playful on set, with Aaron Paul describing him as a kid trapped in a man's body. Aaron Paul's casting was also initially questioned by production, as Paul looked too old and too much of a pretty boy to be associated with meth cooking. Gilligan reconsidered Paul's skills after seeing his audition and recalling that he had also guest starred on the X-Files episode Lord of the Flies. Gilligan originally intended for Pinkman to be killed at the end of Breaking Bad's first season in a botched drug deal as a plot device to plague Walter White with guilt. However, Gilligan said by the second episode of the season he was so impressed with Paul's performance that it became pretty clear early on that would be a huge, colossal mistake to kill off Jesse. Similarly, Dean Norris had shown his ability to be a law enforcement official in the X-Files episode F. Emasculada, and was brought on to be Hank Schrader, Walter's brother-in-law and DEA agent. Other cast members later described performance choices that shaped their characters. Anna Gunn described Walter Schuyler White as grounded, tough, smart, and driven, and said the character's stalled writing career reflected her desire to be creative and productive. R.J. Might, who has a milder form of cerebral palsy than Walter White Jr., said he learned to walk on crutches and slowed his speech for the role. Giancarlo Esposito said his Ashtanga yoga and meditation practice helped him create Gus Fring's controlled, methodical physical presence. Bob Odenkirk said he was offered the role of Saul Goodman during the second season, when the character was planned for the final 4 episodes. Odenkirk contributed Saul's comb-over hairstyle and drew on Hollywood agents and film producer Robert Evans for the character's fast-talk delivery. An oral history of Saul Goodman later described the character as initially uncertain in long-term importance, before Odenkirk's performance and the writer's development of the role led to the creation of Better Call Saul. Jonathan Banks said he avoided closely modeling Mike Ehrmantraut on Harvey Keitel's Winston Wolfe character from Pulp Fiction, despite comparisons between the two cleaner roles. Music was done by Dave Porter. He composed the original score and main title theme for Breaking Bad. Porter became involved with the series through music supervisor Thomas Golubic, who was preparing for a meeting with Gilligan and the producers while the pilot was being developed. Porter supplied temporary music during the pilot process and was later hired as composer after Gilligan and the producers responded to his work. Golubic said Porter helped build the sound of the series, and that the title theme developed through several drafts before the production settled on its final version. Porter said his goal was to create a score that reflected the particular world of the series rather than using a conventional orchestral approach. He avoided traditional Western or orchestral instrumentation and instead used ethnic instruments, found sounds, field recordings, vintage and modern synthesizers, and electric guitar. The score was recorded and processed digitally, allowing sounds to be altered into new textures. Porter described the score as a unifying element for a series that moved between drama, suspense, black comedy, and violence. The score also reflected the series' Western influence. Porter said the instrumentation was not generally Western, apart from the resonator guitar used on the main title theme, but that the music shared an aesthetic with classic Western scores. He connected this to Gilligan's references to the use of sound in films such as Once Upon a Time in the West, as well as to sparse orchestration, short solo motifs, deliberate tempos, and the desert landscape. Porter also said that the production often avoided music during dialogue-heavy scenes and major revelations, allowing the writing and acting to carry those moments. He treated the end credits as part of the storytelling process, discussing with Gilligan what emotion the audience should be left with after each episode. Golubic supervised the use of licensed music in the series. He described music supervision as a storytelling process and said Breaking Bad allowed for unusually obscure and exploratory song choices. Budget limitations also affected the process, sometimes pushing the music team towards less obvious selections. Golubic cited TV on the radio's DLZ, used during Walter's confrontation with another methamphetamine dealer, as a song choice that helped mark a turning point in Walter's transformation. He also said that Gilligan selected Badfinger's Baby Blue for the final scene of the series after thinking of the song while writing the finale. The New Yorker later described the song as thematically tied to Walter's attachment to his methamphetamine operation, and noted that the series often used popular music as a plot device or clue rather than merely as background music. Several soundtrack albums were released for the series. Breaking Bad music from the original television series included Porter's main title theme alongside licensed songs used in the show. In 2012, Madison Gate Records released Breaking Bad, original score from the television series, a 20-track album of Porter's score from the series. Scientific accuracy in the show. Donna Nelson, a professor of organic chemistry at the University of Oklahoma, checked scripts, helped prepare dialogue, drew chemical structures, and wrote chemical equations that were used as props. Gilligan said Nelson approached the production after watching the series and offered to help with this chemistry. He said the production consulted experts in chemistry, electrical engineering, and physics when needed, although there was no full-time science advisor on set. Gilligan also said that Nelson reviewed scripts to keep the chemistry dialogue accurate and current, and that the production also consulted a Drug Enforcement Administration chemist based in Dallas. Nelson said Gilligan was interested in presenting the science accurately and that this was important to him. Several episodes of Mythbusters examined the plausibility of scenes from Breaking Bad, with Gilligan sometimes appearing as a guest. In 2013, the Mythbusters Breaking Bad special tested 2 scenes from the first season, and concluded that neither were physically plausible as depicted. The test found that hydrofluoric acid would not fully dissolve metal, flesh, or ceramic as shown in Cats in the Bag. They also found that fulminated mercury could produce an explosion, as shown in Crazy Handful of Nothing, but that Walter would have needed a much larger quantity of the compound and would have had to throw it at a much faster speed, likely causing fatal injuries to people in the room. A later Mythbusters episode, Blow It Out of the Water, tested the plausibility of mounting an automated machine gun in a car as in the series finale, Farina, and found it plausible. An episode of Mythbusters Jr. concluded that the electromagnetic scene in Live Free or Die was not physically plausible. Jason Wallach of Vice commended the accuracy of the methamphetamine cooking methods presented in the series. He noted that early episodes depict the Nagai red phosphorus and iodine method, which uses pseudoephedrine as a precursor to d-methamphetamine. By the season 1 finale, Walter changes to a reductive emanation route involving phenyl-2-propanone and methylamine, reflecting the difficulty of obtaining enough pseudoephedrine for larger-scale production. The series depicts phenyl-2-propanone as known as phenylacetone, or P2P, being produced from phenylacetic acid and acetic acid, and a tube furnace and thorium dioxide catalyst, and later depicts reduction using mercury-aluminum amalgam. The blue color of Walter's methamphetamine is a recurring plot point in the series. Although the product is described as highly pure, pure crystal methamphetamine would normally be colorless or white. Debbie Ball of the Candy Lady in Albuquerque created the methamphetamine crop used in the first 2 seasons. Ball said the first version was clear and that the blue tint was chosen later by the production. In their article, Die Chemie de Breaking Bad and Chemie in unserer Zeit, translated into English by Chemistry Views as the Chemistry of Breaking Bad, Tunga Salthamar and Falk Harnisch discuss the plausibility of the chemistry portrayed in the series. They write that chemistry is depicted primarily as a manufacturing science with limited attention to analytical methods, and that scientific subjects are incorporated into dialogue to support a fictional world in which chemistry plays a central role. Technical aspects of the show. Michael Slovis served as cinematographer for Breaking Bad, beginning with the 2nd season. Although series creator Vince Gilligan and Slovis wanted to shoot the series in CinemaScope, Sony and AMC did not grant permission. Gilligan cited Sergio Leone's westerns as a reference for the visual style he wanted for the series. Slovis received 4 Primetime Emmy Award nominations for Outstanding Cinematography for a 1-hour series and Outstanding Cinematography for a single-camera series. Breaking Bad was shot in 35mm film because of the durability of the equipment and the format's suitability for economical production. The use of film also allowed for a later digital transfer to 4K Ultra HD resolution. By the end of the 5th season, episodes cost upwards of $6 million to produce. Kelly Dixon was one of the series editors and edited many of its meth montages. For the montages, she used techniques such as jump cuts and varied the speed of the footage. Dixon received 6 Primetime Emmy Award nominations for Outstanding Single-Camera Picture Editing for a drama series, and won the award in 2013. Now for the episodes and seasons. Season 1 had 7 episodes during the year 2008. Season 2 had 13 episodes in 2009. Season 3 had 13 episodes in 2010, and Season 4 had 13 episodes in 2011. Season 5 had 2 sets of 8 episodes each. The first 8 released during 2012, and the second 8 released during 2013 to finish the series. And later film being made in 2019. Season 1. Walter White is diagnosed with inoperable lung cancer after passing out in a car wash. Realizing he doesn't have enough money to pay for treatment, and after going on a drug bust with his brother-in-law, DEA agent, Hank, Walt resorts to cooking crystal meth. Obvious choice. He decides to team up with his former student, Jesse. Jesse obtains an RV to cook in from his friend, Combo, while Walt devises a revolutionary formula using unregulated chemicals, creating a highly pure product tinted blue. Skylar does some researching and finds out about Jesse's history with drugs and confronts him after Walt creates a fake confession that Jesse dealt him cannabis. After a run-in with the Mexican cartel, Walt adopts the pseudonym Heisenberg and trades his blue sky meth with psychotic drug lord Tuco. Hank, along with the rest of the DEA become aware of Heisenberg's presence in the drug trade and begin investigating. Season 2. Shortly after Walt and Jesse complete their first deal with Tuco, they are kidnapped by him. After being held hostage for a day, Hank discovers their location and shoots Tuco dead. Walt and Jesse hide from Hank and are never found. After Hank leaves, Walt and Jesse are alone. While Jesse simply returns to town without an excuse, Walt pretends to enter a fugue state. Walt's held in a hospital until doctors are assured it won't happen again. Walt finally tells his doctor he faked the fugue state, although he doesn't tell him what actually happened with Tuco, instead fabricating a story about running away to avoid family. Jesse's interrogated by Hank, but is never arrested. After a failed attempt by Walter and Jesse to start their own business, resulting in two of Jesse's friends, Badger and Combo, being arrested and murdered respectively, Walt hires corrupt lawyer Saul Goodman, who connects them to high-profile drug distributor Gus Fring and fixer Mike Ermentrout. Jesse is kicked out of his Aunt Virginia's house by his parents and quickly tries to find housing. He finds an apartment managed by Jane Margolis. Shortly after moving in, Jesse starts dating Jane. Jane introduces him to heroin after relapsing. After selling a shipment to Gus, Walt refuses to pay Jesse his half of the money, suspecting he'll use it on drugs. But Jane threatens to reveal Walt's secret to the public if he does. Walt returns to Jesse to apologize, but instead finds him and Jane passed out on heroin. Although he is capable of intervening and saving her life, Walter allows an unconscious Jane to choke to death on her own vomit due to an overdose. Jesse wakes up the next morning and finds Jane beside him, dead. Mike comes over to destroy any trace of their heroin use, and traumatized Jesse enters rehab. Days after Jane's death, he witnesses a mid-air collision of two planes. A result of Jane's father, Donald Margolis, an air traffic controller, returning to work early despite still being distraught by his daughter's death. After being put under anesthetics for a cancer surgery, Walt accidentally reveals he had two cell phones. This causes Skylar to do some more research, and finally finding out about all of Walt's lies, Skylar confronts Walt and files for divorce. Season 3. After Skylar confronts him, Walt briefly retires from the drug trade. Despite retiring, Gus manages to convince him to start cooking again with a new and larger lab. Now being kicked out of the house, Walt moves into an apartment. Skylar comes over, and Walt finally confesses to her about his affiliation with the drug business. Meanwhile, Jesse, with help from Saul, purchases his house back from his parents. Around this time, Saul hires Mike to install surveillance throughout the White residence. Hank's investigation leads back to Jesse through the deceased Combo. He finds no evidence, but assaults Jesse in a fit of rage, believing he tricked him into thinking his wife, Marie, got into a car crash. Shortly after, he is suspended from the DEA. Walt, in order to keep Jesse from pressing charges against Hank, coerces Gus into replacing Gale with Jesse as his lab assistant. Hank is attacked by Tuco's vengeful cousins and kills them, becoming paralyzed in the aftermath. Both cousins eventually die. Jesse meets Andrea Cantillo in rehab, and they shortly begin dating. She is the older sister of Tomas, the murderer of Combo. She also has a young child, Brock. Jesse's behavior becomes erratic, and Walt is forced to kill two of Gus's drug dealers to protect him. After an enraged Gus orders for them to be killed, Walt convinces Jesse to kill Gale so that Gus is unable to replace them. After Hank finds out about Gale's drug history, he suspects he was Heisenberg. While being mostly bedridden, he begins investigating Gale's journals. While reading it with Walt, he finds the initials WW and jokingly says it was meant for Walt. Walt dismisses it as being a reference to author Walt Whitman, being one of Gale's favorite authors. Season 4. Originally, many episodes of 4 minutes in length were to be produced for the premiere of the 4th season, but these did not come to fruition. Gus tightens security at the lab after Gale's death, while he and Mike drive a wedge between Walt and Jesse, coercing Jesse to be their solitary cook while at the same time eliminating the Mexican cartel. Skyler accepts Walt's meth cooking and conspires with Saul to launder the earnings through purchasing the car wash Walt used to work at. Hank, in recovery, tracks Gale's death to Gus and the drug trade. Walt tricks Jesse into turning against Gus through poisoning Brock with a lily of the valley plant, along with convincing Hector Salamanca, the last living member of the cartel, to detonate a bomb while meeting with Gus in the nursing home, killing them both. Season 5. On August 14, 2011, AMC announced that Breaking Bad was renewed for a 5th and final season consisting of 16 episodes. Season 5 is split into 2 parts, each consisting of 8 episodes. After Gus's death, Walt, Jesse, and Mike started a new meth business. When their accomplice Todd kills a child witness during a methylamine theft, Jesse and Mike sell their share of the methylamine to Declan, another distributor. Walter produces meth for Declan, and Gus's former associate, Lydia, starts distribution in Europe, which is so successful that Walter amasses $80 million, which he buries on the Tojajile Indian Reservation. After Walter kills Mike during an argument, he is given names of Mike's imprisoned men from Lydia. Walt hires Todd's uncle, Jack, and his gang to kill Mike's associates. They also kill Declan. Hank discovers Walt is Heisenberg and begins gathering evidence. He turns to Jesse, who helps track Walt's money to the reservation. When Walt is arrested, Jack's gang arrives. They kill Hank, capture Jesse, and take most of Walt's money. Walt is forced to flee alone with the remaining money. After months of hiding, Walt plans to surrender but changes course after Elliot and Gretchen publicly minimize his involvement in starting Gray Matter. Walt manipulates Elliot and Gretchen to give his earnings to Walter Jr. After poisoning Lydia, Walt makes amends with Skyler over his criminality. Todd, Jack, and his men are killed during a shootout orchestrated by Walt, but Walt is also shot. Jesse is freed and Walt succumbs to his wounds. Themes in the shows. Western influences. Breaking Bad has been analyzed through the framework of the Western and the modern Western. In 2013, Vince Gilligan described the series as a modern Western, connecting its New Mexico setting and isolated characters to Western imagery. Scholar Amanda Knopf argues that the series draws on Western motifs while reworking the genre through Walter White's transformation into a violent anti-hero, and through the show's use of desert landscapes, moral ambiguity, and masculine identity. J.J. Clark similarly places the series within the tradition of frontier narratives in Western film, describing it as both a revisionist Western and a meta-Western that examines how frontier mythology shapes modern characters such as White. Lenora Ledwin also connects the series to Western tropes, arguing that its scenes of bargaining and confrontation resemble the classic Western shootout and tie the show to ideas about the American dream, masculinity, and the frontier.